time for our preview for the 2025 Washington Commanders on the Athletic Football Show. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Anything you might disagree with, who you think is going to win this division, any players that we're not thinking enough about. The Washington Commanders offseason in 60 seconds. We're doing this for every single team. Terry McLaurin currently holding in. Acquired Laramie Tunsil from the Texans for 4 picks, including a 2026 second and a 2025 third. Acquired Deebo Samuel from the Niners for a 2025 fifth-round pick. Signed Javon Kinlaw, 3 years, $45 million, $30 million guaranteed. Signed Von Miller, 1 year, $6 million. Brought back Marcus Mariota, one of the highest paid backups in the league. Brought back Bobby Wagner, 1 year, $9 million. Zach Ertz, 1 year, $6.2 million. Brought back John Bates, who we'll talk about a little bit later. 3 years, $21 million, $11 million guaranteed. Small deals in free agency for Jonathan Jones, Will Harris, and Dietrich Wise, all of whom will be in the mix on that defense. In the draft, Josh Connerly, offensive tackle, 29th overall. Trey Amos, the corner, in the second round, 61st overall. Wide receiver Jalen Lane, 4th round, 128th overall. Again, they did not have a 3rd round pick because of the Laramie Tunsil trade. Jonathan Allen, De'Ami Brown, Jeremy Chin, Dante Fowler, all lost in the offseason to free agency. Well, they cut Jonathan Allen, but he's on a new team now. What are you most excited about, Dave, for the 2025 Washington Commanders? I have a feeling I know where you're going with this.
Let me see if I can hit the listeners with the next level analysis that they've come to expect from the Athletic Football Show. I'm excited about year 2 of Jayden Daniels and what that means and what it could look like. You're talking about a quarterback who's capable of throwing for 4,000 yards and rushing for 1,000 yards in the same season. I think that's on the table for him. Like, it is a thing that I can imagine happening. Maybe only if Terry McLaurin ever comes back to camp, but it's on the table. If he plays, if he progresses from his rookie year, then we can officially, I mean, some people already feel this way, but we can officially start talking about him as a top 5 quarterback in the NFL. Playing for a legacy franchise, a franchise that went so long without something to be excited about. All of that kind of ties in for me. Like, it's not just Jayden being great, but Jayden being great in a very historically good football market that hasn't had a whole lot to be excited about. And he's only turning 25 this year. So if he cements himself as the guy that we think he is, what else is there? Like, what could be more exciting than that?
I asked when I was there where they thought he needed to get better, and no one had a good answer for me. It was kind of like, well, by the end of last season, he was already one of the best players in the league, and I think that it was an honest answer. I'm curious from your vantage point, Derrik, when you see Jayden Daniels going from year 1 to year 2, the small gaps in his game that you want to see him fill in, what are those for you?
For as much as he can bail himself out of trouble, he still creates a lot of trouble for himself by hanging in the pocket, and I think being not late on stuff. Like, when the ball comes out, he's usually on time, but sometimes the ball just doesn't come out and he hangs onto the ball. And he still took, for as exciting as everything was, he still took like a pretty equivalent to like Caleb Williams level sack rate. And I think it's just obviously Caleb didn't have all the good plays to counteract
it. Wasn't
whereas Jayden,
that bad.
It was like, in terms of plays where he was pressured, it's the pressure to sack ratio was like kind of similar.
Go ahead. Keep going.
He just didn't get pressured nearly as much because the Bears were awful. And
Robert's pulling this up right
Washington
now.
Washington did a much better job of their pass protection plans. And obviously Jayden's part of that. He did a really good job of beating the blitz. But like, when Jayden Daniels got pressured, he took a lot of sacks. And I think that needs to get cleaned up. And then still, this is like a me thing, I think, more than Jayden Daniels thing. I still want to see some more aggressive throws in like the 12 to 20 range over the middle of the field. And I don't think he needs that to be an elite quarterback. I think he can be perfectly fine without it. Joe Burrow was for a large swath of his career until really last year. But I still want to see a little bit more of that selfishly.
Jayden Daniels had a 22.2% pressure to sack rate last year. Caleb Williams was at 27.8%. It was still a top 5 rate for Jayden Daniels among quarterbacks who had at least 50% of their team snaps, but not quite as bad.
Not quite as bad, but I don't know. Given how much more help he had, I feel like that 5% gap can get, close a little bit.
Jayden Daniels finished 5th. Caleb Williams finished 2nd. Caleb Williams shooting for 2nd place, though. Will Levis has the crown. 29.6% of Will Levis's pressures turned into sacks last year. I'm really excited to see what year 2 of this offense can look like with Jayden Daniels. And the way they built this thing, and we'll talk about this in a second when we just talk about resource allocation and relative strengths and weaknesses of the roster. But they just said, we're going to put the best offensive line in front of him that we possibly can, because if you look at quarterbacks around the league, truly elite quarterbacks around the league, If they're protected, they can make the most of the pass catchers. This has been true for Patrick Mahomes. It's the exact strategy that the Chiefs took after that Bucs Super Bowl, where they said, we don't care who he's throwing the ball to. It doesn't matter. Like, we'll have him throw to Juju Smith-Schuster and we'll still win the Super Bowl. It doesn't matter as long as we're protecting him. It's exactly what the Bills have done with Josh Allen, where Josh Palmer is like the number one Bills receiver right now, and they're projected to lead the league in points scored according to Vegas because they built up that offensive line. The important part of that calculus is that Jayden Daniels has to be as good as Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen for you to make good on that. And so if he can firmly establish himself as in that club of quarterbacks by the end of this season, I don't think he has to be the MVP of the league. I don't think he has to be quite to those guys' level. It took them 3, 4, 5, 6 years to get to that place. But if he can be that definitive fifth, sixth best guy, like at the top of the next tier, which we talked about this on an entire show in July, it feels kind of open, that next tier, then I think that decision of we're going to make sure that we just have the best offensive line possible, he'll lift the pass catchers. I think that can work if he becomes that sort of guy. Not even becomes, but really asserts himself and confirms that he's that sort of guy.
Yeah, if he just continues to climb up the ladder closer to that.
Yeah.
Whereas like last year, I think he was probably like, for me, like the 8th, 9th best quarterback. And it's just like the super exciting stuff we remember, and that team got a little lucky. If he climbs 1 or 2 more spots and cleans up some of that like pocket management, then yeah, he's definitively as good as they need him to be.
What are you excited about with the 2025 Commanders, Derek?
The people playing in front of him, the offensive line. Because I think on a roster standpoint, the offensive line was mostly terrible last year. Like it was a lot of not good players. Like Tyler Biotish is fine at center, and right guard Sam Cosmi I think is a pretty solid player. But other than that, it was a lot of like, we're hanging on to our hats, and they kind of circumvented it by, obviously Daniels is a really good scrambler, and obviously he can be part of their run game, but they threw a lot of screens. They threw a lot of stuff that was supposed to be, a lot of their go balls were just like, we're just going to chuck it up immediately. They did a really good stuff with their pass protection plans in terms of, okay, we're full sliding a lot. We're changing up like which tight end is staying in when we're in 12 personnel, that sort of stuff. So they did really, really well with all of that. I would like them to just not have to do as much of that. And I think that that's going to be the case this year. When you bring in a Laramie Tunsil and you draft a first-round right tackle in Josh Connerly, in theory, you don't need to do as much of the, we're adding 2 more tight ends to stay in pass protection and having to full slide one way in BSR protection. Like that will still be nice as like a little change up for them to keep defenses honest. But they could probably get away with more like 5.5 man protection, depending on what you want to do with the back, than they were ever able to get away with last year. And then on top of that, their run game last year, when you didn't include like Jayden Daniels being part of like the option game, it wasn't good. Like the straight up handoff to the running back run game was bad last year. If that can go from bad to average because of guys like Connerly and guys like Laramie Tunsil, we're starting to cook with some gas here.
I think that's spot on. Yeah. I think when you talk to people there about, all right, what does this allow you to do? The phrase that somebody said to me was, we have to be less tricked out this year than we were last year because of the guys that we have along the offensive line. And I think we've talked about it a lot this offseason. I think how intentional they were about going out and improving those spots. And we'll see when Sam Cosmi gets back. Obviously, that's going to be a big question. It sounds like he's hit every single benchmark. He's stayed there and rehabbed. They're very happy with the timeline of how this is going. Whether that means he's back by week 2 or week 5, I have no idea. But they're pleased with how that process has looked, even though he tore his ACL in the playoffs. So if that group gets back with Cosmi early in the season, and now you have improvements at both tackle spots with Tunsil and Connerly, and Brandon Coleman comes in and really establishes himself at guard, which I think he has the chance to do after playing left tackle, kind of on and off last year. And that group can really dominate on the ground without all of those bells and whistles we saw last year. And then the pass protection can improve when it comes to them being able to sit in the pocket and make plays later in the down without him scrambling. I think that's how you start to stave off the regression with a lot of the coin flip things that went their way last year. We talked about this on the Seat at the Table show. They converted 87% of their 4th downs last year. They were 20 of 23. They converted 45.5% of their 3rd downs last year, which was the 6th highest rate in the league. They won so many games on the last play or the last possession. There was just a team that got lucky in a lot of ways last year in manners that are hard to keep up with. But I think that they're not just rolling it back and saying, oh, we were good enough last year, look at the results. And I think that is, even if they've had to accelerate their timeline a little bit, and I think there's some downsides to that, I appreciate that they're trying to get out ahead of some of these problems, and I think the offensive line is the best manifestation of that.
My only commentary on that would just be specifically with offensive line play, it can be so much harder than it sounds during the summer. And I appreciate what they've done. I think it will work in the long run, but Tunsil, as good as he is, just got there. Brandon Coleman is playing guard for the first time. Cosme has not had a camp. And unless they announced it while we were recording, the right tackle job isn't officially decided. Like last time I looked at this,
I'm calling it.
You're calling it. Okay.
Josh Connerly.
Hey,
is the
you know
right
what?
tackle.
Even if Josh Connerly wins it, you're still talking about a rookie right tackle.
Yeah,
so
that's fair. That's fair.
I think this could be a situation where in the early going of the season, at least, we're like, why doesn't this look better? What the hell? Like they got all these guys. Why this was supposed to be great and it's not great. It could get much better by the end of the season. That is what I would expect to happen. That's typically the way things work. You need time on task. You need all these guys playing together to get that sort of consistency and chemistry. I won't be surprised if it doesn't look as beautiful as we hope, at least right away. Now, if it does, then you could really be cooking with gas. But I want to at least throw in the possibility of that happening.
I think that's totally fair. I think with the right tackle situation, they're very intentional with how they do these early competitions for rookies. They don't hand anybody jobs. Even if they think those guys are projected starters. They didn't do it with Jayden last year. They were playing Marcus Mariota in the first part of training camp. That is an organizational philosophy. I think Josh Connerly will probably end up being the right tackle. The other beneficial part of this with the offensive line construction is that they didn't lose any of the starters from last year. Those guys are all still there. And so this team has a lot of depth and contingencies along the offensive line that most teams don't have. If you lose Josh Connerly, your right tackle from last year is there. If you lose Brandon Coleman, your left guard from last year is there. And so there is a level of depth, I think, on the offensive and defensive line with this team, even if the defensive line ceiling isn't that high, that a lot of other teams do not enjoy with how their rosters are constructed. I think that's at least worth mentioning. The floor is pretty high with this group. Let's get to the swing points for the 2025 Washington Commanders, the areas that this season could pivot on for this team. Derrik, why don't you kick it off? Your swing point for the 2025 Washington team.
I think to me, when I envision this team being good, it has to be the offense being a top 5 unit again and being capable of scoring 30 points. I know we're excited about the offensive line, and I'm very excited about the offensive line raising the floor a little bit. If they want to make sure they can still do explosive stuff, like Deebo Samuel has to be a very, very effective player for them. Because last year, in terms of explosives, it was a lot of like, Jayden Daniels, please do something, or Terry McLaurin was down the field and he hit him. And like, that was kind of a lot of their explosive. Like, their screen game was okay, but it was really a lot of like, we're either chucking it down the field or Jayden Daniels just did something insane. They did not have a lot of like other tertiary ball carrier has the ball and makes a play with the ball in his hands. Deebo Samuel, I think they brought him in exclusively to do that. So they can do some of this jet stuff. Their screen game can open up a little bit more. If they just hit him on a shallow route, instead of it going for 6 yards, he makes one linebacker miss and he picks up 17. Like just little stuff like that where they have a player they trust with the ball in his hands who is not Jayden Daniels to get them chunks at a time. So I think he is like, if he is who we saw, 4 years ago, like, or at least some version of that, that to me is how this team maintains like a really, really high level of play.
What's nice about the Deebo Samuel fit with this team is that you don't have to use your imagination about how Deebo Samuel gets deployed within this offense. Like there are plenty of offensive systems around the league, Dave, where I'm like, all right, can you make the most out of Deebo Samuel? He's a specific type of player. Are you set up to deploy him in the correct ways? I do not have that question about the Washington Commanders and Cliff Kingsbury. Like they have this role within their offense. At the end of last season, it was just Dyami Brown. And so giving all of the Dyami Brown touches to Deebo Samuel, we saw in the preseason game last night. I mean, they're handing jet sweeps to him and the guy, when he's healthy, and I think he's lost a little bit of weight, I think he's coming into the season healthy, which is a good thing. If they can get 85-90% of what the best version of Deebo Samuel looked like in Washington and he can stay healthy, it is a boon for this offense, again, that knows exactly how to use this type of player.
It was a little bit of a meme in the early going of last season that Jayden just wasn't throwing past the line of scrimmage on a regular basis. And obviously that like it changed and we absolved ourselves of a lot of those concerns, but like those types of throws and plays are built into this offense. Cliff Kingsbury loves that type of And now he's got a guy that can do it at a high level. And it's so funny. I'm trying so hard not to let preseason stuff that I just watched color my opinion. Like, Debo got that jet sweep on Monday night, and I was like, I don't know, that looks pretty damn good. And like, you have to remember, like, hey, it's the preseason. This Bengals defense has, they got some problems they got to sort through. So I'm trying not to get too excited when I see stuff like that. But it was an encouraging sight.
We'll get to the rest of the pass catchers here in a minute. I think Debo is particularly important because of what the rest of that room looks like, but we're going to hit that in another one of the categories. My swing point for this team is the pass rush. And, for each of these teams, we're doing swing points and what's keeping you up at night. And there are subtle but important differences with that. And I think before I really started looking at it, and before I started looking at some of the numbers and then going to visit Washington, the pass rush is what would have been keeping me up at night. The fact that they weren't more urgent in adding edge rusher bodies to this room. And I'm not counting Von Miller in his mid-30s, but in the second round, they did not get one of those edge rushers. Most of them were gone by the time they picked in the back half of the second round. They did not go for one of the mercenary guys that signed in the actual rhythm of free agency, the Joey Bosa's of the world, Josh Sweat, DeMarcus Lawrence. I think that they were probably interested in that group. They just got priced out of them. They weren't willing to go to that place. I mean, Joey Bosa and DeMarcus Lawrence are aging players with significant injury histories. And so I just think that market got a little bit rich for them. And so they went a completely different direction. They added more bodies to their defensive line. And I think they're just going to be very specific roles for these guys. And so they're banking on waves of players, depth, and situational deployment with this group. The thought is, if we can stop the run a little bit better on early downs because of the players that we have, and then we can get the pass rushing bodies on the field in defined passing situations, are we going to be able to cobble it together in a way that makes sense? I kind of get that, right? Like, I understand the argument for it. I'd rather just have one dude that I think can be a terror, and they just do not have that guy. But if Dietrich Wise can get you into more second and nines, and then Von Miller can come in and be that guy off the edge, can you kind of make that an amalgam of one player? I think that's the thought process. We'll see if it actually works out. And they were 25th in early down run defense success rate per next gen last year. They were bottom 10 in the league in creating second and long opportunities. And so if they can be a little bit stouter there, and then on 3rd and 8, we're getting to a place where it's Von Miller, Johnny Newton, Deron Payne, Dorrance Armstrong, Frankie Louvu slots in there. Do they have enough to actually get by? I think is going to go a long way in determining how good or just average this defense can be.
So that's kind of the thing to me. This is not, I think you can get to that, the run defense helps us on passing downs in two different ways. It can be we're really good at getting teams into 2nd and 9 and 2nd and 8 because we kind of choke out the air and we just don't give you a whole lot. Or we can be a team that's a little bit volatile and sometimes we give up 2nd and 4, but sometimes we get in the backfield. I think they have to be that kind of unit. They have to be Arizona was a little bit of this last year, but you have to be we're just hoping Javon Kinlaw gets in the backfield. We're hoping Von Miller dips under a tackle and gets in the backfield. I think they have to be that style of run defense to get into these passing downs. So if their run defense success rate is the same, but they get closer to average or slightly above average in terms of getting in the backfield, that to me is how this can work out.
And they're willing to tap into creative methods if the front four isn't getting there. I don't think that's off the table. I mean, this is a team that had the 7th highest blitz rate in the league last year per next gen. They use creepers on 3rd down at the 6th highest rate in the league. I mean, they're willing to get creative if they don't think those guys are going to be able to get home. I think they're going to try to see if we can get there with this group is more than the sum of its parts. We're going to use a lot of stunts, games, etc. before they actually tap into we got to send more bodies at the problem. But if they have to break that glass, I think Dan Quinn and Joe Witt, their defensive coordinator, are going to be willing to do that. Let's get to what's keeping us up at night. Dave, what is keeping you up at night about the 2025 Washington Commanders?
I've mentioned it on several occasions, and I promise Commanders fans I'll shut up about it until we've played some games after this. But there are just a uniquely large number of players on this roster where you have to at least wonder whether the cliff is approaching. You are just asking for a lot of production from a lot of older players. I also promise for these previews, my concerns won't always be so existential, but it is an alarming number of veteran players. I mean, we've gone over it before, but just the big names playing some of the big positions. Marshawn Lattimore is 29. Will Harris is also 29. Deebo Samuel is 29. Terry McLaurin is turning 30 during this week 2 of the season. He also hasn't had a camp. Austin Eckler is still kicking around. He is 30. Laramie Tunsil just turned 31. Zach Ertz is 34. Bobby Wagner's 35. Von Miller is 36. That's so many senior citizens that are expected to play meaningful roles on one team. And hopefully they're all great, because the Commanders will be a more fun team if they are. But I start to worry about the cliff, about running out of juice. And some of these guys, not all of them, but some of these guys are playing roles where you can't really afford them to fall off a cliff. Lattimore in particular. Deebo, I think, changes the ceiling of this team. McLaurin goes without saying. Tunsil, I would even say Bobby Wagner. And Von Miller doesn't need to be good for this team to be good, but him being good, again, is a ceiling raiser. So these are important guys that have played a lot of snaps in their careers. And I think about it often, clearly.
And guys with injury histories. Marshawn Lattimore's been banged up. Deebo has been banged up. And I think that's hugely important. For this team to be who it wants to be on both sides of the ball, Lattimore and Deebo need to be those guys. Lattimore has the 4th highest cap hit among all cornerbacks in the league last year. And they gave away multiple picks to go get him. And I think that's also part of this, Dave, is that this is a team that's older than you think for what we consider an upstart. They have a lot of aging players. They've already traded away draft picks over the next couple years. They made 5 picks this year. And so you're combining an older roster with fewer draft picks over the next couple years to restock the cupboard with younger players. So it's just a little bit more fragile because they've accelerated the timeline than year 2 of a surprise regime typically would be.
Yeah, this is the team that is microwaving the window, which I can respect it. I get it. It's incredibly hard to win in this league. And if you really think you can do it, go for it. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that, if half of the players that Dave mentioned fall off a little bit, and I know Lattimore and Deebo aren't that old, but given their injury history, feel 3 or 4 years older than they probably are. And then guys like Bobby Wagner, I understand that the name is very prevalent, but he can't run the way that he used to. He can't turn in coverage the way that he used to. And if that, gets 5-10% worse again, the way that it has the past couple of years, you're looking at a linebacker room that is Bobby Wagner, who I think really at this stage is only really good between the tackles. And then Frankie Louvu is a really fun player, but he's also a very specific player. And if Bobby's not going to potentially play as well, then that starts to become a little bit more fragile is the right word. That just becomes more fragile than it feels when you look at the depth chart right now.
Speaking of fragile, the thing that's keeping me up at night is the pass catcher situation beyond Deebo Samuel and Terry McLaurin. Deebo Samuel, who again has struggled to stay healthy in recent years and can get banged up at a moment's notice. Terry McLaurin, who still is not practicing with this team because of the hold in. And if we get back in a couple days and it's 2 weeks that he gets to practice, and hopefully you get the Terry McLaurin that we saw last year. But we've seen this. I mean, Brandon Ayuk was not the same guy last year after sitting out the majority of training camp with that contract dispute. And so if you're getting a slightly diminished version of Terry McLaurin and Deebo Samuel gets banged up, have you looked at the wide receiver depth chart for this team beyond those 2 guys?
Yes.
I haven't liked any of it.
The next guy up would be Noah Brown, who's also hurt. He's currently hurt. We're talking about Luke McCaffrey, Chris Moore, Michael Gallup, KJ Osborne, and Jalen Lane, who they drafted in the 4th round. We are very close. The receiving core was bad last year when it comes to the talent. And we are very close to it being that group again without Noah Brown and De'Ami Brown, who were the next 2 guys up among that group. That is concerning to me. And if Deebo stays healthy, and that's why he is the swing point on this team for Derrik, if he stays healthy and plays well, all of this stuff matters a little bit less. But the current state of that room, we are one Deebo Samuel injury away from me being very, very worried about how this is going to go.
The point that you made, Robert, was a good one about the Chiefs prioritizing protection for Mahomes and he can win with Juju Smith-Schuster. It's worth pointing out they gave him phenomenal weapons for the first 4 years of his career before they did that to him. They were very confident he was the best quarterback in the world before they started sending Tyreek Hill out of town and making do with guys that aren't as good as you'd prefer. Jayden Daniels in year 2 probably needs better pass catchers. Even with Terry McLaurin and Deebo there, It's good. It's fine. It's not great. And I know you can't have everything, but he's a little early in his career for me to feel comfortable asking that of him. Like, I think it would be better if he had some difference makers.
We talked about it with a couple other position groups. There are some teams that wield the rookie quarterback contract with big money guys. That's how they use the advantage. This team has sort of done that, right? Lattimore, Laramie Tunsil, Debo to an extent, even though they split up the cap hits. But one of the other ways they've wielded it is with depth for some of these mid-tier veterans that other teams just don't have the flexibility for. The Dietrich Wises of the world, Allegretti, Wiley, the guys that were starters but now are backups and are on these mid-tier contracts. This team has depth and flexibility at multiple different position groups that I do think insulates it a little bit. They do not have that at receiver. Receiver is the spot where they absolutely have none of that, and that's what leaves me a little bit worried because I do think that Jayden Daniels is a very good quarterback. I'm not sure we can take Luke McCaffrey to the Super Bowl good.
Yeah, there's only like 3 of those, and it's no shame on him if he's not one of those guys yet. That's okay.
Derrik, what are you watching in the first month of the season for the Washington Commanders? We're hitting this for every single team.
I just want to see what the secondary is supposed to be because I think last year, obviously first year of Dan Quinn with this defense, it was not a corner room that I think he wanted. Mike Sanger's still having to play outside to fix a lot of issues. They had Benjamin St-Juste, who is like the opposite to me of what a Dan Quinn corner is supposed to like, what he's good at. Like St-Juste to me is a cover 2, we play zone, we put hands on people. And it's like, well, Dan Quinn wants to play single high and play man coverage. And now he's gotten a little bit better at bringing some pressures and cover 2 stuff. But like in his heart of hearts, I know what Dan Quinn wants.
That's what they want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And like this, now the guys that they have now, you draft Trey Amos, who to me is like a put hands on you man coverage corner. They signed Jonathan Jones, who his entire time in New England was a put hands on you, get on the line of scrimmage, man coverage corner. Sanderstill is now supposed to go back to the nickel. So I just want to see like, are they going to go back to being more of we're going to play a lot more single high man coverage and just hope our 4 or 5 man pass rush gets home to you? And that's kind of what I'm looking for.
When I was talking to people there about what they needed to do better on defense this year, rushing the passer was not what they said. It was, we want to play better man coverage. We want to be the man coverage team that we aspire to be. They played it at the 5th highest rate in the NFL last year, which was actually higher than I thought because they weren't leading into it early in the season. But then when Lattimore got there, they were more willing to say, okay, it's time for us to play the way that we want to play. Mixed bag. They were bottom 10 in success rate when they didn't get pressure last year. They were 4th in success rate when they did get pressure last year. So I think the hope is that normalizes a little bit. Even if we're not getting home because we're bringing extra pressure, can we still hold up in man coverage? And the corner room obviously was different when Lattimore got there, but when you compare the cornerback room at the start of training camp this year to the start of training camp last year, it's entirely different. Like Mikey Sainristil was really the only guy that they're playing, and it's not even in the same spot. And so him moving back to the nickel and just getting a focus on that, and now you have a combination of Amos and Jones on the outside. We'll see what happens there. I think Amos eventually becomes the starter there, even if he's not getting it from day one. We've talked about Lattimore. And so if that group can really be a strength of this team compared to the weakness, the defined weakness it was last year, then I think that they can start playing the style that they want to, and they can be a team that lives in man coverage, even if they're not heating up the quarterback because they're blitzing a ton. What I'm watching over the first month of the season is what happens against man coverage on offense. It was the man coverage questions on both sides of the ball. Because when I'm thinking about how I would challenge this offense in Jayden Daniels, teams are scared to play man coverage against scrambling quarterbacks. But if you look at the numbers, it doesn't really bear that out. Like, scrambles aren't more effective against man than they are against zone. And Jayden Daniels actually had a higher scramble rate against zone coverage last year than he had against man coverage. And so when I'm looking at this receiver group, and if we want to make the same comparison to, the Mahomes, Allen type teams that have skimped on the pass catchers and really built up the offensive line, what teams have done against both of those is they have really cranked up the man coverage and challenged the pass catchers. It's like, if your pass catchers are not going to be a strength of your team, can we make them beat us? That's what man coverage tells you. And even if we like Debo in his specific role, last year Debo was 92nd among 120 wide receivers and tight ends that had at least 50 targets in EPA per target against man coverage. That is not what he does well, and that's one of the reasons that teams started doing it so heavily against the Niners. The Washington's best receiver last year on a rate basis against man coverage was Olamide Zaccheaus. He is no longer here. And so this is a group that Zach Ertz, Debo, where if you're playing a lot of soft zone, they can hurt you. If you're challenging those guys, what does it look like? And if you look at Jayden's numbers against man last year, he was 19th in EPA per dropback on non-scrambles last year against man coverage. And so now with an entire year of game plan stuff, an entire year of how do we focus on this team, are we going to see more controlled rushes where you're crushing the pocket a little bit, playing man, trying to keep him contained and say, we're going to make the receivers on this team beat us? And so that's what I'm looking for. If teams start leaning into the plan that we saw from like the Steelers last year against this team, a game where Washington's offense really struggled, not everyone's set up to do that. But if we see more game plans tailored that way, does this team have the firepower and the flexibility to respond well to more of those man coverage looks where they struggled a little bit last year relative to how well they did against zone?
And I'm like kind of dubious of that because, again, Deebo Samuel, even if Deebo Samuel has a good year, that's never what it's looked like for Deebo Samuel is beating man coverage. So like that is certainly part of it. We talked about all the other options, like Zach Ertz, your starting tight end, is not beating man coverage. All of the other tertiary receivers probably aren't. And then even though I think McLaurin can, I think some of the success that they had against man coverage last year was like, oh, Terry McLaurin has a one-on-one. I'm just going to hit him down the field. Well, what if your deep ball success falls a little bit? Because that stuff, even though Jayden Daniels, I think, is a very good deep passer, what if you just get like a little bit more unlucky there? And that hurts you a little bit. So like that's, I think bringing up their ability to beat man coverage is pretty important.
What I'm hearing is Jayden's got to get a little more comfortable living in the tight window world, which
which is my other criticism of him. He does need to do that.
But if you don't have the receivers you trust in that world,
it's
does
hard.
that work? And I think that's the problem with this team if teams start challenging them a little bit more. And one of the other elements of this is this team does not use a lot of motion in a motion-heavy world because of the tempo that they play with. And so I think that playing a little bit more man against them because you're not having to worry about some of the buttons other teams can press to take advantage of man coverage, there's a lot of things stacking up to I want to see defenses challenge them, and I want to see how they respond. The most important supporting character for this team, and I promise you, I wanted to talk about this guy before his highlight blocks on Monday Night Football last night. I'm going with blocking tight end John Bates, and I want to talk about him for a few different reasons here. This team last year, defenses account for them in a unique way in the run game. They, even to their 12 personnel, because of Zach Ertz and because of how spread out they play, they saw the fourth lightest boxes in the league last season to their 12 personnel. They had 84 carries into nickel out of 12 last year. Washington did. Only the Chiefs, Eagles, and Ravens had more, and they were second in the NFL in EPA per carry on those runs. And Bates is a big part of that because of how they can weaponize him as a blocker. And this comes in two different forms. If you watch the way that they use him, he truly, and he got paid $7 million a year this offseason to do exactly this, he can hold up at the point of attack against edge rushers in a way that most tight ends in the NFL just cannot do anymore. If you want him one-on-one to handle an edge rusher, he can do it, which is a rarity these days. But the other thing, Derrik, that just sticks out to me when I watch him, he is incredible moving to the second level and blocking in space. And so if you watch this run game, they do a lot of leaving the end man on the line of scrimmage because they're doing a ton of read stuff with Jayden Daniels. And so you'll see John Bates influence the end man on the line of scrimmage and then move to the second level. And his ability to track guys in space and then stick and then maintain contact with them no matter what's happening is incredibly impressive. Like he has this strange ability to be able to track down guys and latch onto them in whether it's corners, safeties, linebackers as he's moving to the second level. He is like perfectly tailored to be a weapon in the run game for this team specifically. And I am not surprised at all that he got rewarded this offseason for exactly that.
Yeah, he's like outside of the truly like special blocking tight ends, the George Kittles, like Rob Gronkowski at truly his peak. Usually tight ends fall into the line of like they're a really good athlete so they can get to the right spot and they can just be a roadblock. Or like if we're running straight behind them, they can move people a little bit the way that like, I don't know, Darnell Washington can. The John Bateses where they're actually very good in space and can move linebackers once they get to the second level, which again, in that Monday night game, we saw it. He put Demetrius Knight and pushed him into Logan Wilson, who was trying to scrape over the top like that. The fact that he does that like regularly, and I know Knight's a rookie and stuff, but like that is something Bates can do. It's a huge part of their offense because this is a run game that wants to be diverse. So if they want to do some of this, they're running gun power behind him and he's got to like help on and then climb up to the second level, he can do that. If they want to run some of the arc read stuff where they're getting him out moving in space to go be kind of a cavalry man in front of Jayden Daniels out on the perimeter on some of his runs, he can absolutely do some of that stuff. So I think when we talk about the offensive line hopefully being a better run blocking unit with guys like Connerly and guys like Tunsil, I think having Bates a part of that equation is a big part of it for them.
Dave, who was your most important supporting character for the Washington Commanders?
Well, if we're mentioning guys that starred on Monday night, yeah, like this feels redundant if you watched the Bengals Commanders game, but I held off buying into the hype about Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt for a long time, which Bill Krosky-Merritt, by the way, apparently that's what he prefers to go by, which just rules. But when you're leaving Brian Robinson home from a preseason game because you're thinking that hard about trading him, then I gotta pay attention and I gotta take this seriously. And of course, he broke out with an explosive touchdown run. Pretty much the main highlight of his night. But yeah, I think you saw why Commanders camp has been buzzing about this guy. And if Brian Robinson is in fact traded, then all bets are off in terms of like who the lead back is in this room. I mean, Eckler's still there. Chris Rodriguez also had a really nice run on Monday night against the Bengals, but this is a guy they just drafted. Clearly the regime, like they brought him in, so clearly they're high on him. If Brian Robinson's not getting in the way, then I absolutely understand why this is a name that's been, buzzing around social media for the last couple weeks.
We don't typically see this. I mean, the last guy that kind of did this was Isaiah Pacheco in a backfield that didn't really have any established guys. And Brian Robinson has kind of been an established guy for this team over the last couple of years. And so the fact that they're willing to move on from him for Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt in that role within the offense, or some combination of him and Chris Rodriguez, I think says a lot about how quickly he's come along. I mean, when I was there, again, it was early August and it was pretty early in training camp, and they were already in a spot where they were like, we have real competition at running back because of this guy that we drafted. So not at all surprised that they are excited about him and what he is bringing to the table. Derrik, what counts as a successful season for the Washington Commanders? We're answering this question for all 32 of these teams in our previews.
So I think it's winning the division, and then also like to me, the way they would win the division is like, I would like Cliff Kingsbury to prove to me that this is real. Like, I think if he can prove that he is a guy who is like truly built for the long term for this, that is an extremely successful Washington season.
Dave?
It's twofold, really. I'm going to start with the important thing. All that really matters for me when you have a 24-year-old quarterback who's on the cusp of greatness is just solidifying that is true. Like obviously CJ Stroud got his team to the playoffs last year. It wasn't a disaster, but I don't want the CJ Stroud experience. I don't want to be back at the podcast table next offseason like, well, this is, life in the NFL is hard. No, like I want Jayden Daniels to be the man. I want him to look like an MVP candidate and the first guy in the next tier, And on top of that, if he is that guy, then the Commanders will at least be in the mix. Like you're not going to have a quarterback that good and suck. So if Jayden Daniels is that dude, that is the biggest priority. But if he is, they'll be a playoff contender. As long as they're on the graphic in the last weekend of the season and Jayden Daniels is awesome, then I think this was a success. Even like playoff games and wins don't necessarily matter to me this year, even if that would be fun. But if Jayden is good, all of that will come.
I almost think that's more important, Derrik, than the Cliff Kingsbury question, because if Cliff does it again, he's just going to be a head coach again. I mean, that's going to be the end result of that. And so I think that Jayden kind of establishing himself as that guy is probably more important for the long-term health of the Washington Commanders.
That is true. I guess for me, it was like, I have more faith that Jayden Daniels can do that. With Cliff Kingsbury, I'm a little bit more like, we'll see it again.
I think running back the offensive quality and success from last year would be a good one to include as what makes up a successful season. To me, it was just 10 wins and a playoff berth. Like if the offense can be good and the defense can be average, and this is like a 10 or 11 win team and they get back to the playoffs, again, because they can win the same number of games this year and be a significantly better team that's a little bit less lucky. And I think if that's the end result, I have no issue with that whatsoever. I think that is a success. And then you're building to something potentially in 2026 when you can really round out the areas of this roster that are still relative weaknesses.
I think it just depends, because again, to bring the Texans back up, like the Texans won 10 games and won their division, and we just argued for a half hour over whether we think they're a good team. Like we just did that a week or two ago.
But the Texans were like the 27th best offense in the league last year as part of that equation.
Right.
I think for Washington to be a success, you need to be like the 7th best offense in the league and be a 10-win team.
If they are a 10-win team because Jayden and their offense kick ass, then yes, absolutely.
Yes, because that's the thing that has staying power. Thanks for watching The Athletic Football Show. Subscribe to the channel to keep up with us. Like and comment on this video, and we'll see you next time.